What's going on, guys? Khalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the OnePlus Nord N200 5G. Now, this is a video I've personally been looking forward to because I am a big fan of Nord's budget phones. So in this video, I'm going to be going over everything you need to know about this device to help you decide if it's the right one for you. Now, before we get started, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. But with that being said, let's get into the video. So this phone has a 6.49-inch IPS LCD display with a 90 Hz refresh rate, a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 405, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 83.7%. As you can see here, the bezels are pretty thin, giving the phone a nice modern look, and the hole punch design for the front-facing camera really adds to this. I think it looks real nice. And by the way, this camera is 16 megapixels, so you can expect to get some good pictures from it. Now, I do have the brightness at 100% right now, and I think it looks really good. Having a 1080p resolution is really nice, especially in this price range, because usually even the 5G phones in this price range end up only being 720p. Like for example, the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, that phone is a little bit more expensive than this one, but not by much. It's still in the same general area as far as price goes. And that phone, if I can remember right, has a 720p TFT display that doesn't look nearly as good as this phone's display. So that really says something. OnePlus really went all out with the display on this phone, and they did a good job. As far as the size goes, it is a pretty good size, 6.49 inches. That's a weird number, but basically 6.5 inches, you're really not going to notice much of a difference. And it is a large enough display to be good for content consumption, like streaming videos and viewing photos, since this phone also does have a higher resolution. And the 90 Hz refresh rate is going to help out a little bit too. With the higher refresh rate, all the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother. So when you're doing stuff like playing games, watching videos, and that sort of thing, it's going to be a better experience overall. Now, despite the display being a pretty good size, the phone is also really thin and comfortable to hold in your hand, so it's not bulky at all. Overall, I really do like this design. It feels nice and it has some weight to it, giving you a more high-end experience with the device overall. For storage, this phone is getting 64 gigabytes of internal storage with micro SD card expansion as well, which is pretty standard for this price range. I don't want to say it's bad because it's really not. The average user is not going to need more than 64 gigabytes. And if you're a power user, you would need a lot of apps to take up all the space on this phone. And for most everything else, like photos and videos and that sort of thing, you can always put that on a micro SD card if you have to. But at the same time, it's still not the most impressive because I've seen plenty of phones in this price range that have 128 gigabytes, which is double this. So while this phone's storage is pretty good, it's still not at the top in its price range. Now, there's no wireless charging with this phone, which is not a surprise at all because very few phones that aren't flagship phones have that feature. But on the bright side, we do get face unlock and a really nice fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. This is one of my favorite spots for a fingerprint scanner because it's just so fast and convenient. You're most likely going to be pressing this button to wake up the display anyway, so you might as well have it unlock at the same time. So that being said, let me demonstrate how fast it is. There we go, one more time. And there we go. As you can see, that second time, I didn't actually even press the button. I simply put my finger on the scanner and it woke the phone up and unlocked it immediately. So this fingerprint scanner is real fast and responsive and super convenient to use. I have no complaints here. Now, taking a look at the rear camera setup, we got a 13 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So unfortunately, no ultra wide, which I think is a pretty big drawback because I personally use that feature all the time. It's so useful. So it is a disappointment that they don't have that, but everything else is at least decent. For video, this phone has a max quality of 1080p in both the rear and the front cameras, which isn't bad. 1080p is pretty standard until you get into those upper levels, but I have seen 5G phones around this price range that can shoot 4K or at least 2K. So as with the storage, the video quality might not be the worst, but it's not the best either. Internally, this phone is getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 5G processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on the phone, and it came back with a single core score of 507 and a multi-core score of 1554. This is around the same ballpark as the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, which is a little bit more expensive than it. And honestly, even then, having a phone under $300 that has this much processing power is a real good deal in my opinion. You're gonna be able to do pretty much anything you might do on a daily basis. If you're doing basic activities like browsing the web, going on social media, that sort of thing, this phone will handle it like it's nothing. And if you're doing gaming, that should be fine too, especially with the 90 Hz refresh rate. That's gonna make your experience a little bit better if you're doing something that involves motion. The only thing I would say is with the really high-end games like Fortnite, it might struggle just a little bit, and maybe video editing with large files, that might be a tough spot for this phone too. But other than that, you're gonna be able to do almost anything. So if you are looking for a 5G phone in this price range that does have a good processor, this is gonna be a good option. This phone also has a 5000 milliamp hour battery that supports 18 watt fast charging. So this is a real good battery. You're gonna get a ton of life throughout the day. And even if you use the phone a lot throughout the day, you're most likely not gonna have to charge it. And even if you do run out of battery during the daytime, the fast charging is obviously gonna allow you to charge it a lot faster than a phone that doesn't support fast charging or just supports a lower wattage. In addition to that, having a 5000 milliamp hour battery means the phone is gonna have more longevity, because down the road, as the battery degrades, with a larger battery like this, you're not going to notice it nearly as much as you would with a phone that has a smaller battery, so you won't have to replace the phone as soon. Another thing I like about this phone is that it has NFC, which not all phones in this price range, even 5G phones, have. For example, the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G doesn't have NFC, and that phone is actually a little bit more expensive than this phone too. So seeing that this phone does have NFC is nice. In case you don't know, NFC is the technology behind contactless mobile payment services, which have been getting a lot more widely used. So it is more and more important these days that you have a phone that does have NFC so you don't miss out on that feature. So now that we've gone over some of the specs of the phone, let's take a closer look at the hardware. So on the left side here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the micro SD card and the volume keys. On the right side, we got our super useful power key that doubles as a fingerprint scanner. Nothing much on the top, just our noise canceling microphone right here. On the bottom, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack, the microphone, a USB-C port, and the speaker. Not a whole lot going on the back. Real minimalistic look. I am a big fan of this. It has a matte finish, of course, that doesn't really show fingerprints. We got a OnePlus logo right here, and really nothing else. There's the camera setup and the flash, and it's on this little ridge here, and I think that looks really cool. Overall, like I said before, the phone has a lot of weight to it, making it real comfortable to hold in your hand, and it gives it a nice high-end feel. This phone does come by default with gesture navigation, which, in case you don't know, is the other navigation style instead of the buttons. So to go to your home screen, you just swipe up. To go to your recent apps, drag your finger up from the bottom. And of course, to go back, you can either do this or this. It doesn't really matter which way you swipe your finger. But if you do want to learn more about gesture navigation and what you can do with it, definitely subscribe to the channel, because I will be posting a beginner's guide for this phone real soon, where I go more in depth about that kind of thing. But in conclusion, my final thoughts about the OnePlus Nord N200 5G. This is a really good phone, especially for the money. It has a great display, one of the best in this price range that I've seen so far. It has a really good processor, it has a great battery, it has NFC, all kinds of nice features. The one thing about this phone I'm really not a big fan of is the camera and just the camera setup overall. The front-facing camera is really nice, it looks nice, takes good pictures, all that. But the rear camera setup, even though it aesthetically looks cool on the phone, is a little bit underwhelming, especially considering other phones in the same price range and even lower price ranges than this have better cameras. I wasn't too impressed by the photos taken with this phone, and it doesn't have an ultra wide camera. I know there are people out there who do use the macro camera, but I personally have never even used it for any practical application, so I really can't relate. But on the other hand, I have used the ultra wide camera rather frequently, and I know a lot of other people who do too. So at the end of the day, I do feel like they should have had at least an ultra wide camera instead of the macro camera. It would have made a lot more sense to me. And of course, the video quality for a 5G phone and pretty much just mid-range phones in general, usually they do end up being able to shoot 4K. But then again, in this price range, it is really 50-50. But since the phone is a 5G phone, my expectations are a little bit higher than if it weren't. So there is that. But other than the camera setup, I do think this is a really good phone that's definitely worth checking out in 2021. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video.